I'm Susan from Country Made USA, bringing you another video about simple sewing techniques that can be used on any machine. I've looked at the questions on some of my other videos, and my neighbor, whose name is Emily Orff, who I am dedicating this video to, asked me a bunch of questions, and I realized that some little hints on sewing tips would be very helpful. And so let's begin. I think my cameraman needs to move the camera. Okay, first of all, each of my sewing machines has a dust cover. This one, I don't know what it fits on, but it doesn't fit on this machine, and I don't have one, so I cover it as best I can to keep the dust off. Okay, the first thing I'm going to talk about is lighting. Most sewing machines have a light on them. I also have miscellaneous lights by each sewing machine depending on what I'm doing. You can buy these anywhere. Some of them screw in, some of them clip in. Very nice because you can see what you're doing down here. I do have a cheat sheet so I don't miss anything from Emily's questions, which will help so I don't skip anything. Okay, first thing I'm going to talk about is thread. The thread on the top and the thread down here, you want the same type of thread. I like the Coats & Clark all-purpose thread. It comes in all kinds of colors, and I don't have any of the other thread around anymore. Okay, now let me show you. This comes with one of those little kits. Now, if you get a piece of this other kind, it's breakable. You don't want to sew something, spend a lot of time on it, and it breaks. This kind is more heavy duty. You have to get some energy to break it. So all of mine, when I first started sewing, I started out with the cheapest I could find. And that is not always, now I have all Coats & Clark. It's the best that I have found, and all my sewing machines take that. Right now I have a blue in the bottom and a white on top, but they're both Coats & Clark, so they're both the same. Let's see, I'll wait on that part. Machine needles. This is a Singer sewing machine. I use a Singer needle. Keep all my needles in a little box for all my machines, because some of these are universal. These are Singer specific, but they also say universal. These are all size 14. A 14 needle is what I normally use for nearly everything. There's also an 11, which has a yellow top, and it's for like lingerie, really thin, usually stuff you can see through. And maybe, and then I think your ballpoint is for knit, but some of my sewing machines will sew it even though it's not knit. And then for really heavy duty stuff, you use a 16. That would be like denim. If you use an 11, which is for lingerie, and you're sewing denim, you'll break your needle. Needles cost money. You don't want to break your needle. One of the things to remember when you break your needle, pay attention to what side is flat on your needle. You want to put your needle exactly the same. If you put it backwards, you won't be able to figure out why it won't sew right. It'll loop. And the other kind of needles are hand sewing needles, and I have all types. And I don't hand sew very much. I try to do everything on the machine. But when I see them at yard sales, I collect them just in case. Well, so I don't ever run out. Let me see, make sure there's also specialty needles for like sewing sails, stuff like that, and you can buy those, and I don't have any available. Next, we're going to show a couple of stitches. I'm using black cloth. This puts this up and down, and it holds your fabric in place. And of course, when you look, perfect stitches, perfect stitches. If you have any loops on the bottom mean there's something wrong up here. Loops on the top means there's something wrong down here. And usually, I can't believe that just sewed. This isn't actually set up, because it's supposed to go in and go through those little things so it's threaded. Maybe I have it in there backwards. See, now see when I pull it, it's staying right there. But it's still, this is my favorite machine. I don't have any problems with it. It has all metal parts. I don't think I've ever replaced anything on it except my husband replaced the cord. But it's a wonderful machine. And as you can see, it's sewed pretty much the same, even though that was unthreaded. Stitch sizes. Nearly every machine has one of these. This one you cannot read. The top says 30, the bottom says 7. 30 is going to be a really, really tight. That's 30, I think it's 30 stitches per inch. Now if I wanted to do, oh wow, I've got everything stuck in there. This is one of the things Emily asked me, and I didn't realize that it was a question because I've sewn too many years. This is number 6, which is at the very bottom, and it's actually a gathering. It's the biggest stitch you can make, and you can make a gather with it. And it's a very big stitch. Okay, and usually I have it somewhere in the middle because I don't need a gather when I'm sewing, and I don't need 30 stitches per inch. That would take forever. I mean, that's so dang small, I can hardly even see it. But you can see the difference. I'm usually in the middle somewhere. So that is basting, and that is like this is a regular stitch. First one I did. It's just a regular stitch. But when you go backwards, I put it all the way up, and then when I put it down, sometimes it'll be basting, and I have to put it where it should be. Okay, the next, I don't want to miss anything. Okay, oiling the machine. And I think I've already done a video on oiling nearly every one of my machines. This is the oil I buy. And it usually goes in any of the holes. When you get done oiling, you don't want to sew anything really, you want to sew something that's not that important, because sometimes the oil will drip down. The other thing is, because no matter where I live, it seems to be extremely dusty. And so I now have a brush, and I actually will dust my machine. And I don't know if the camera can zoom in that good, but you can already see the dust in here. So that is really, I mean, look at that. So usually anytime I replace that thread, I will dust in here, and you can see that the dust is bad. And that's not good for your machine. Last weekend, I actually took a lot of this apart and dusted in it. And it was, I don't know if it's because it's by the heater vent or I don't have a good enough cover on it. But, I mean, this is not too bad underneath here. But finding one of these little brushes, I actually got this one at a yard sale about a month ago. And it just works really good. And you just dust anything that you think has dust on it. Well, you don't want to thread your machine. But especially down in there. So dusting is a big thing. Okay, bobbins. There's a bobbin, a different type for every machine. And I actually had a question on a specific machine. And I didn't know it because... actually, this is the wrong bobbin for this. This bobbin has one hole in it. And it's pretty sure this would still work on it because it's also a Singer and it's very similar. But the width and you'll know pretty quick if the bobbin's wrong. Okay, I'm going to show you the other bobbins on the machines. This is a dust cover I just made for this one, and it works good. It's just basically sewn together, and I made a little crease. Fits over it really good. This bobbin, oh, I thought I had a spare sitting out here. Maybe I don't. It's very similar to this one. This one's also a Singer. But not all of the Singers have the same bobbins. This one of the other things, the reason I have 3 machines is I have blue thread on this one, white thread on that one, and black thread on the other one. And I can go from one to another without hardly any problem. This one also fits. This one's the one with the bobbin. These are a regular Kenmore bobbin. They have lots of little holes in them. And I am really good at recycling containers. This is a Sears Kenmore, but this is for one I have put away. This machine takes a very thin, wide bobbin. It's the only one it's a very old machine though. It's actually a deluxe rotary, and it actually came in a wooden case. And I have another video on this exact machine. But it's an old, this box has the new machines in it. And one of the things I always try to do when I get a new machine is I get the manual. I try to get a copy of the manual. This one goes to this machine. This one goes to this industrial machine, and I'll actually write how much I paid for it, where I got it, and it'll jog my memory. And then of course my favorite machine back over here, I've copied it, and if I ever have any questions I can usually find it in the Singer book or the Kenmore book. Okay, each machine has, a lot of these machines have their own, actually this machine doesn't have anything extra. But this machine over here actually has 2 boxes of attachments, and I keep it by this machine. And I wrote on this box, even though this is a really old box, I hate to, but I didn't want to accidentally, but all of the attachments, there's extra bobbins in here. I label them, I leave them by the machine so that there's no way I can accidentally sew the wrong one. This machine actually came with these 2 boxes. But a lot of machines have extra attachments. I thought this one, no, this one didn't come with anything extra either. Okay, the next thing I'm going to cover, let's see. Okay, buttons. Well, actually, I might as well just show you my pins. This comes from Harbor Freight. It has a magnet on the bottom. My pins stay in there pretty good. When I had my kids at home, I was always dumping my pins over, or they would help me dump them over. And I try to have pins by each sewing machine. The buttons, I have, this is a peanut butter jar. It has the wrong lid on it. But these are big buttons. I make a lot of these round purses that I sell on Country Made. And I have all these big buttons in here, so I can just pick one that matches with the fabric. And so I have them sorted by what I'm going to use them for. These are all little buttons. And this is a Talente Gelato. I like these kind of jars because they screw on. And some of these I've had for decades. These are just miscellaneous buttons. I have all my red ones and the ones that look like gears in this one. And then these are like medium. And then I have a lot of other buttons, but those are the ones I use the most. And they actually go in the bottom drawer of my cabinet. But I wanted you to be able to see the different kinds of buttons. So now the next thing I'm going to do is, this elastic is really thin. It comes in white or black. And I think I will use a black piece. And I'm just going to show you how easy it is. The loop on that bag is where I remembered that these are really easy ways to make a button. So if you loop this, and you want to kind of measure your button that would go in there. This would go in a seam. Let's see, how do I do that when I'm not making a project? Let me think for a second. Okay, so this is the right side of your fabric. You're going to fold it over. Here's your loop for your button. You're going to stick that in there. And then when you sew your seam, whoops, make sure that stays together. I usually make it a little bit longer so I can hold it out here. And then I go back and forth over it so that it can't get away. And then when you open up your seam, there's your loop. And then whatever you were making, you'd sew the button on the other hand. And it would just loop over. And I have these are book sleeves to put a paperback book in. This is where I use them. And so you put your book in there, and then this just loops right over, whoops, loops right over that button and keeps it so your book can't slip out. So, very easy and easier. I don't really like making buttonholes, so they're not my favorite. So that's one of the ways I've found. And normally I would put a white loop on this, but I wanted it to be able to be seen. But just make sure you backstitch a lot so that this does not come undone when you stretch it. Okay, the next thing, scissors. All my kids, I have 7 kids, I have 7 grandkids, they all know these are sewing scissors. They do not cut paper, ever. Once you cut paper, they won't cut cloth. I should have had an example of the paper ones. But these will cut very, very easily. I mean, that's very easy. These two are my backups. These are just cheap Walmart ones. Same thing. Cut right through. The third kind of scissors is for seams. And I think that's the next thing, is the seams. Yes, it is. These, see, I made this little seam for this. Now if I leave it like this, this is going to come unfrayed. These are called pinking shears. They have like a triangle thing. When you cut this, it makes it so the seam, if it does that, it will stop right there. And it won't come undone now. It's very cool. Very fast. These are not cheap though. And so I didn't have any for a long time, but I love them and I use them for everything now. The other thing is some machines have zigzag. You can zigzag the edges. The third thing is we're going to do a close-up on a special kind of seam. And I think this, I can't remember which seam is which. But on this one, you have your wrong sides together. You have your right sides out. And you're going to do a very small seam. Oop, that was a gather stitch. Okay, see, that's right along the edge. Now, you're going to fold this. And most seams are 5/8. Now this is going to be, make sure you have your fold there. This is going to be a 5/8, and 5/8 is about that big, like a 1/2 inch, pretty close. When I first learned, I actually had a piece of tape there because I didn't know how big it was. Now I don't have a tape there because I sew so much. Now this is a very clever seam. You can't, it's very hard to do it on curves and stuff, but if it's a flat, now look at that. There's your seam, there's no raw edge. And when you open it up, there's your seam. So that is one way to get it so it doesn't unravel. Now the other way, I have one more. Let's see if I can remember how to do this. This is right sides together. You do a 5/8 seam. And normally at each end, you're going to do a back stitch so it doesn't come undone, the thread. Because if you pull this, this will come undone because it's not stuck. But because I'm just doing, showing some tips. Now on this one, you're going to cut one side of that seam allowance. That's what this is called, seam allowance. You're going to cut it like to 1/8 of an inch. Oops, that's a little bit big, so it won't work as good. Hope I remembered how to do this right. I haven't done this in a long time. Now, you're going to fold this to the seam and then flip it over. Okay, see there's that piece. You're going to flip this. You're going to hold that down. There's your seam. There's the little piece. Fold, fold, and then you're going to stitch. Now, this works really good on straight seams. And this, one of these is called a flat filled seam, and I just don't know which one. I just think they're clever ways. And look at that. It also makes you have a top stitch. But there is nothing that can come unraveled. It's very nice and neat. So that's the second one. So you got this way, and you got this way, and you got your pinking shears, or you can, I have never liked using zigzag, so I don't use the zigzag. But I got this piece of fabric to show you an extreme how the fabric actually comes apart. And if you don't do something to that seam after you sew it, it'll just keep coming apart. You wash it and all this it'll be really bad. Some of your fabrics like knit you don't have to do it. This does not come apart. You don't have to do anything. It's just there. And it won't come apart. And so you don't, but on your cotton, you can tell. All of this kind, you can see the little strings coming off. Okay, let me see if I covered everything. Well, as I showed you the covers, all of my projects I keep in boxes so that they do not get dusty. So, and so sometimes I even label them. But that makes everything nice and clean. And when you get your project out, because sometimes I'll start on one project. I'm really bad at starting on one project and going to another project because I get tired of working on those. So I have lots of these boxes and they keep the dust out. Let me see if I covered everything. I think I did. And so, as I said before, this is dedicated to Emily. Hopefully this will help anybody who is learning to sew with some tips. And this is brought to you by Country Made. Voila!